として見てて心配だったこととかからまず教えていただけませんか？
そうですね。やっぱりマーケット1月はやや円安金利上昇、少し荒れ模様だったと思うんですよね。で、その積極財政が、その財政が行き過ぎるっていう部分を、これ片山さんから見ると誤解かもしれないんですけども、市場はそういう受け止め方があったと。で、もしその円安金利上昇に歯止めがかからなくなってくると、場合によってはその日本株も持ちづらいっていう人も出かねない可能性ってリスクシナリオとしてあったと思うんですよね。で、株も売られると、これトリプル安になってたかもしれないので、トリプル安ってそれこそそのトラスショックだとか、あるいはトランプ大統領もグリーンランドとかをめぐってトリプル安でちょっと市場の恐怖を感じて政策を少し表現をマイルドにしたみたいな話もあったりしましたので。いや、
完全にそうですよ。
そうですね。でその点ではその市場の、1月時点ではまだ黄色信号になりかけるぐらいの感じだったと思うんですけど、もしその黄色から赤へっていう風になる悪いシナリオがよぎっていた時期だったと思うので、この辺のコミュニケーションは非常に難しいなと。で、実際ただ選挙勝ってからは、為替も金利も割と落ち着いているので、その向こう水な積極財政っていうよりも、ややこの責任あるっていう部分の方が少しクローズアップされてきて比較的落ち着いてきてるのかなっていうのが今のところかと思いますけどもね。
はい。まさに総理が選挙に打って出るということを、ある程度表明されてから、維新とのお約束でもある2年間に限った特例公債に頼らない飲食料品に限った消費税の減税と、それが最終的な形としては給付付き税額控除で、いわゆる低所得者中等所得者の負担の軽減の制度につながると。これをどのように言おうかということは話し合いをしてて、ある程度その話し合いの範囲のことを1月19日に総理は会見でおっしゃったんですよ。それでこれから解散するという現職の衆議院議員や候補者は非常に喜んで、これはいいわと、息上がる、それこそ希望を与えられる強い意志でこの国を引っ張るというメッセージが出ていいものだったっていう、そのメッセージをバーッともらって私たちは飛び立ったんです、チューリッヒに。で、そのチューリッヒにいる間私たちニュースとか聞いてないので、降りた時に、ちょっといろいろ反応が出てるっていうのが夜遅く入ってきて、で、翌日私がダボスの会場に行ったらですね、マイク攻めになっちゃったと。ただ、それは本当にその時言ってよかったのは、まず私が今申し上げたように、かなり責任あるの方に重きを置いて、つまり限定で2年間でその先は給付付き税額控除につなげるよと。で、財源は特例公債に頼らないよと。で、ここがトラスさんとは全然違うわけで、しかも飲食品だよということを言ったら、半分ぐらいの外国プレスは、その要するに消費税があまりお気に召さないようでどんどん下げるのね、みたいな認識だったんですよね。それは記者クラブ制度がないですから、どういうご認識を持とうが、それを違いますよ、文章こうですよと言って歩く人はゼロですから、そうなりますよ。で、その場に私がいて、こうなってますでしょと、こういうふうに言ってますでしょと言って、で、日本の財政は、ついこの間通ったばかりの補正予算でも、今から国会に出そうとしている、8年度の予算でも、他の国よりも単年度ではマシだよと。で、かなり国債発行額に目処をつけて抑えてるよとか、債務残高比率も減ってるよと。ほら、他よりいいでしょみたいなのを見せたら、落ち着かせることができる程度のものであったというのは、そうであるのと、あとは、半分以上は英語でやりましたので、そのファイナンスミニスターという国債の発行権者がそこにいて、落ち着いていろんな人と会談したり喋ってるってことは、日本が債務危機にないってことなんですよ。論よる証拠で。それは非常に大きかったですよね。だからそこで大変な目にあったんですけれども、ある程度収まってきた日に、私がいたのは20日1日だったんですけど、その日の夕方にトランプ大統領が入ってきて、グリーンランドに関する EU への追加関税はやめるって言ったんですよ。
柔軟化した時です。ちょうど柔軟化した時ですよね。
で、その前に私と実は、ベッセント長官が会ってるって、何を話したか全部は言わないけれども、彼は日本もそういう問題で懸念を持たれてんじゃないかってことを確かに言ったってことを公表してましたけど、マーケットがより反応したのは、その後についた、2時間ぐらい後についた大統領がすぐにグリーンランドのことを言ったと。その辺は、全部、私たちの頭の中では入ってますから、連携っていうか、連携とは言わないけど入ってるわけですよ。っていうことで、収まる部分の第一弾は収まった。それからもずっとですね、緊密な関係を続けながら、マーケットを注視して、その例の日米の覚書っていうんですか、あれで、必要な時は措置が取れるということでやっていますので。
やはりその片山大臣としては、そのベッセント長官 んとも、日米ともに金利の急な上昇は良くないっていうところに関しては結構認識が共有されてるっていうことなんですか？
まあ、この状況だとそれとか、それが連覇して、ボンド安になるっていうのは世界的に非常によろしくないですし、アメリカも当時トリプル安の危惧を抱えてましたから、非常にマーケットに注視しながら協力できるところは協力していくということは、非常にしっかりシェアされましたよね。
なるほど。選挙後、ひとまず株価は上昇基調を続けてますし、為替も金利も落ち着いてるっていう意味では、その市場の信任もひとまず選挙後は得られてるということかと、現時点では思えるかと思うんです。
やっぱり我々も新しい転換をするのに、随分言ってきたつもりですけれども、伝わりきれなかったのが、一つは、saneiのミスっていうのは、結構サプライサイドなんですよね。つまり投資が足りなかったから日本が伸びなかったと。伸びない国に未来はないと。調整しない国に未来はないと。投資しない国に未来はないですから、投資誘発のために全てやってるんだということ。それで強い国でないと22世紀に、豊かな安全な社会保障もちゃんと享受できる日本でいられないっていうことを言ってるわけだから、それについては誰も否定する人はいないので、その路線以外の路線があるならあるんですかっていう風にして選挙をしたら、我々の方が多くの票をいただいて、多くの議席を得たという現実がありますから、そこについては、海外の投資家も普通の民主主義の選挙はそういうふうにご覧になると思いますね。
確かにサプライサイド的な要素はある一方で、昨年末の補正予算でいうと、どちらかというと、ばらまき的な要素が多かったっていうような。
それはだから短期的にはやっぱり物価対策がまだあるからですよね。当面の問題としては、国民の皆様もそうおっしゃってるし。
その意味では、これからが問われるわけですよね。サプライサイドのものをどういうふうに具体的にお金にしても中身にしても実行力にしてもですね。
だからその17分野の成長戦略がどのぐらい具体的な労働がかけるかっていうのは、これはうちの役所の方ではどちらかというと金融に関して気にしていきますよ。金融が全て握ってるから。だけども、各産業を持ってる分野の大臣にはもう毎日のように言ってます。ちゃんとできるんでしょうねと。
もうそういう意味では成長戦略会議がだいぶ大事な。
そうですね。会議の場で新たに口から泡を飛ばしてああだこうだっていうよりも、準備を日々していただいているものと思ってやってますから。
あと片山さんちょっと伺いたいんですけど、財務大臣になられて、今4ヶ月ほどですかね。
いや、もう5ヶ月目に入りましたね。4ヶ月が経過したってところですよね。
官邸とその財務省のトップでもあるという、この両方の立場でもある中で、改めて、大臣になられて見えてきたものとか、実際のこの難しさとかですね、なられて初めて感じたようなところっていうのをちょっと伺いたいなと思うんですけど。
今までの財務大臣は、前任の加藤さんは比較的若かったけど、ずっと大重鎮がなられると、幹事長じゃない代わりにそこにいらっしゃる方が続いてたんですけど、その時期の方が、今よりは静かな時期で、この2、3年を見てみる、つまりウクライナとロシアが戦争を始めちゃってから、世界のパラダイムって明らかに変わってて、つまり一方的に攻め込むってありなんだと。それについて、世界の中ではグラウンドゼロなんだっていうことが大前提ですよ。だって止められてなくてまだ訂正してないんだから。でそれによって世界経済も世界金融もすごい影響を受けてるんですよ。それに物を言ってこれはルール違反だからダメよと止めさせる勢力がないってことは、まさに本当にグラウンドゼロを実感してますよ。だから、この間うちの同期会をね、財務省の。で、うちの同期は財務官がいないんだけど、国税庁長官は2人いて、次官は1人いて、あと局長経験者も含めて半分ぐらい来てくれたんだけども、やっぱり毎月のようにオンライン会議で G7 があるって言うとみんな、って言うんですよ。それやることあるのって。やることありありなんですよね。で、私たちがほら、重要鉱物の最先端に立っていろいろやったりしてるじゃないですか。でも、他の国では確かにあれは国有財産であって、関税問題なんですよ。マーケット作るから。
なるほど。
で、そういう状態ができてるってことは、経済安全保障的にはもう、セミ有事ですよね。普通の WTO の中でやってても、全く言うこと聞かない人がいるわけでしょ。で、それを武器化するってことが次々行われようとしてて、それに対して有志国が集まって自分たちを守る形を模索してるっていうのが、去年ぐらいからやってるらしいんですけど、私たちの時に具体化して、4月とかにはアグリーメントに行けるかどうかとか決まってくる。で、今度の米中がどうなるかっていうのが注目されてると。その前にうちの総理は、アメリカに行けるっていうことでしょ。その意味ではそこまで持ってこれたのは、我々も必死に努力したんだけど、日本の立ち位置は悪い方には行ってなくて、むしろいい方に立ち位置できるようになってるんだけど、そのためには財務大臣も含めてみんなが必死に働かないとダメだってことですよ。だからそう いう財務大臣なんです、今。
もともとでも財務大臣ってものすごい所掌が広いですよね。
ただ大臣自身が出てって自分で決めなきゃいけないとか、秘書官もついてない、局長もついてない場所っていうのがもはやあるわけですよね。
しかも金融行政も見ないといけないわけですし、
そちらの方も当然変化が。そうですね。
スケジュール的にはもちろん財務大臣どういう仕事かって片山大臣もともとのイメージはお持ちだったと思いますけど。
昔よりも大臣室に上がってくるものの件数が多いと思うし。
多いですか。
それはそうじゃないと、結局官邸と一番やり取りしてるのは私ですから、怖いですよね、事務方だって。そこがずれちゃったら、総理と違うことをやってる財務省って、ただでさえ陰謀論で書かれるので、今度からはだから責任ある積極財政については、私が財務省のホームページに現れて、ちゃんと省内でみんなで考えて、官邸とも打ち合わせしたその説明を、私の言葉で財務省のホームページを開くと出るようにするっていう案を先週ぐらいにうちの事務方の方から私が命令したんじゃないのに、事務方の方から持ってきましたから、もう財務省としてはこの方針でちゃんとついていくっていうことを世の中に言いたいと。それはある意味コペルニクス的展開じゃないですか。どうですか？
いや、本当そうですね。いや、だからやっぱり国民からしてみても、大臣も顔が見えるというか、この人が責任持って自分の言葉で喋ってるっていうのはすごく大事なところだと思うんですよね。そこが指示につながるところが、片山大臣もそうですし、高市さんもそうだと思いますけれども、特に今のこの YouTube とか SNS が多い時代においては、国民のこの支持、理解を得るっていう意味でもすごく大切なことだと思いますけどね。
そこのところが、誤解されないように、例えば複数年度や投資の予算についての枠組みができると、今までやりにくかったことはできるようになりますよ。で、いいものは取り上げられて、いらないものはバッサリ切るっていうのは、それは国民はそれで反対する人いないんですけど、実は査定の関係ではそちらの方が難しいので、より難しいことにチャレンジしてもらうってことなんですよね。で、総理は最初の補正予算の時には鉛筆を握ったんですよ。で、私がだから次官局長の代わりに全部説明して役人は入らないでそこに電卓があったりしたんだけども、それで総理自身も政調会長が長いから分かって、やっぱりそういう要求って未だにたくさん出てくるのねと、これ一体どうやって全部認めろっていうわけみたいな。それもすごく勘どころがいいからお分かりになって、そうすると財務省でしかできない役割っていうのもお分かりになって、だからやり方と枠組みと概算要求の方式などを変えていって、それでもここにプロフェッショナルがいる必要は非常にあるんですよ。だって誰かがその悪役をして調整しなきゃいけないんだから。そうじゃないと全部官邸に行っちゃうっていうことになりますから。それは非常に危険ですよ。官邸は倒れたら後ろはないんだから。
それこそ複数年度って未知の世界が多いと思いますけども、そういう制度設計の面とかでも相当事務方の能力が試されるところですよね。
あとそれからダイナミックスコーリングの納得できないものを作れっていうふうに内閣府に言ってるんだけど、まだ未だに出てこなくて。これはでも後藤さんお詳しいからわかるけれども、ダイナミックスコーリングっていうのは簡単に言うと投資に必要なものにお金を出していくでしょ。それが将来、税収になったりあるいは横連携してマクロ経済に影響が与えられて、入ってくるものもあるっていう、そういうものも全部入れろってことなんですけど、これ完璧なモデルはないんですよね。で、今の、旧景気症モデルにもそれは入ってないので、それをなんとかいじってできないかみたいなことを言ってるんですけども、生成 AI の世界でできないんですか？
だいぶできそうな気はしますけどね。
でもそこにチャレンジしなきゃ面白くないですよね。これはさすがに来年まではできないんで、ある程度長期政権になるならとおっしゃっていただいてるわけだから、そういうことへのチャレンジを、例えば昔だったら日経さんとかね、やったよね。
そうですね。いや、確かに役所だと、失敗は許されないっていうところでリスク取りづらいカルチャーはあると思うんですけど。
そう、だから生成 AI がだから今超大手の IT ジャイアントの間でこっちだこっちだってあるじゃないですか。で、アルトマンができればアルトマンに挑戦する人もいるし、そういう風に出てくるレベルになると、これは使えますよね。
むしろそうですね。多少リスクを取っててもそこは政治判断で、もっと使っていくっていう風にすることが大事かとは思いますけどね。
そうじゃないと、特に投資になると特定のあの人が言ってる的なものが入ってくると、それは非常に問題ですからね。
まだ AI の方が客観性が保てるかもしれないです。
その通りなんですよ。最後の面白い話をしますが、例の保育園をした日本私立事件の時に日本中で保育園の順番とかその辺について謀殺された公務員が山のようにいたわけです。その時にね、富士通さんと NTT さんがね、AI っていうかそういうものを入れたシステム作ったんですよ。それでやったら全部で処理が3日かかんないんですよ。でも時間としては30分かな。で、その分、外れちゃった人との面談ができたんですね、市役所の職員。それが本来あるべき姿で、しかもこういうことでシステムでこうなってますって言うと、恨めないので、トラブル減ったんですよ。
なるほど、ね。
はい。ってこともあるので。
そのあたりはやっぱりこうトップダウンの力でいろいろと進めてもらうのがいいんじゃないでしょうか。
そうですね。だから後藤さんの番組でそのできるだけ AI の話とか、それからあとは今から必要な様々な多様な物質ですね。つまり重要鉱物も含めて、そういうものについて日本中で昔からやってた精錬とかそういうものについて使える部分が何があってって、つまり日本中のアセット的なものをこう掘り起こして、できるものがあるのかないのかについて、それが経産省側にまだないんですよね。たまたま言ってくればやるみたいな話で、もうそれではダメですよね。徹底的に洗わないと。
そうですね。
それはどうしたらいいですかね。それをそこまで財務省がやることでもないんだけど。
でもそういう事例があることは今みたいな YouTube とかも含めて国民に知らせることはできるので、そこで国民の議論も喚起して、で、政治判断でこう動かしていくっていうことが大事なんじゃないですかね。やっぱりボトムアップだとなかなかリスク取りづらいところは多いと思うので。
確かに。様々な手法がこれからこの新しいやり方を入れていく上で出てくると思うので、またぜひ今後ともよろしくお願いします。
ありがとうございます。よろしくお願いします。
Hello and welcome to this session on Japan. We couldn't be having it at a more interesting moment. An election has just been called in Japan, and we have an incredible panel to discuss everything Japanese today. I'm Gideon Rachman, Chief Foreign Affairs Commentator of the Financial Times, and I'll be moderating today's session. We're absolutely delighted to have with us the Minister of Finance of Japan, Minister Katayama, who is here, I think, in Europe probably for less than 48 hours. So we're really privileged to have you here to explain what the Takaichi government is doing. Also, a really stellar panel. The Honourable Kevin Rudd to my right, former Prime Minister of Australia, current US ambassador to the US for Australia, and also an author of books on US-Chinese relations, on Xi Jinping thought, and many other things. Then opposite me, Mr. Morita, the chairman of NEC, one of Japan and indeed the world's leading technology companies. And to my left, a long-time friend of Japan, leading businessman, Mazan Dewaiza, who is vice chairman of Hikma Pharmaceuticals. Minister, let's start with you. As I say, election just called. Everyone is very intrigued to understand what the Takaichi government, which has only been in power relatively recently, but is really doing a new start for Japan, what it represents in economic terms. So you have an international audience here to explain it to. If you had to summarize it, what is it?
Yeah. Thank you very much, last man. Good morning, everybody. My name is Satsuki Katayama, Japan's finance minister. This is the most dramatic moment to talk about Japan. Only yesterday, Prime Minister Takaichi announced officially the dissolution of our lower house. She said she will stake on our new 3 major policies onto the choice of Japanese people. And I will speak about or explain about all these 3, starting with strong Japanese economy through responsible and proactive public finances. And now in Japan, optimism toward these changes is growing. In a recent survey of young adults, confidence in politics jumped from about 20% to over 56%, historically high figure. And almost 50% viewed Japan's future as bright. It's also quite new. We are different from your country. Citing political change and expectation for the new administration. And Japan's nominal GDP has surpassed $4 trillion. Capital investment is at record high, and wages have risen over 5% for 2 consecutive years, and the Nikkei average is now about 5 times its 2012 level. And these results show Japan is shifting from a deflationary cost-cutting economy to a dynamic growth-oriented one, driven by bold investment and productivity gains. Today, I'd like to outline the 3 key pillars of our growth strategy to turn this momentum into sustainable progress. And the first pillar is strategic investment in priority areas. In a country facing future population sharply decline, achieving a strong Japanese economy required strategic fiscal action. and based on responsible and proactive public finances by strengthening Japan's supply structure and raising growth, we aim to lift incomes, restore consumer confidence also, and create a virtuous cycle of improving corporate profitability. We are advancing bold and strategic investments that enhance growth and resilience against potential crises to strengthen Japan's supply capacity. More concretely, we will provide proactive public-private investment to address risks such as economic, food, energy, and resource security. Through delivering products, services, and infrastructure that helps solve the global challenges, we will drive Japan's further economic growth. For example, we are strengthening the semiconductor supply chain through initiatives such as the Lapidus project, which would enable domestic production of cutting-edge 2-nanometer chips. And we are also advancing physical AI, which would enable autonomous robotic assistance and unmanned plant operation by aggregating and training high-quality data. And we aim to achieve more than $330 billion of public and private sector investments in the AI and semiconductor sectors by improving predictability for the private sector through over $66 billion of public support. These key measures for building a strong Japanese economy are also reflected in the 2026 tax reform too. Specifically, we will introduce tax incentive measures for promoting domestic investment in high value-added assets. In addition, we will establish a new category under the R&D tax system, designed to incentivize corporate R&D in national strategic technology domains, such as AI and quantum and biotechnology. Shall I stop?
Yeah, okay. No, thank you very much for setting that out. And you're obviously explaining a lot of things that you intend to inject new dynamism, new hope into the Japanese economy. But it also sounds quite expensive, some of it. You know, there's a lot of spending involved also on defense, I gather, in the new geopolitical environment, which I'll ask Kevin about in a minute. Some bond investors seem to be a bit nervous. I was just talking to some Japanese finance people. They say that the bond yield in Tokyo is going up. What do you have to say to people who are worried, particularly in the bond market, about the implications for Japan's debt?
Yes. Since last October, since I assumed my post, I have been continuously talking with financial sector, pension, insurance, and all the institutional investors that we keep on going with sustainability of our public finances. And in the formulation of the last two economic package, we could have kept our dependency ratio upon GDP lower than the previous one. That is incredible, but that was feasible because tax revenue increased. And our dependency ratio upon debt is as low as 24%. It's 10% lower than it used to be. And our this year's public expense ratio onto our nominal GDP is by far the lowest among G7 countries.
So
that's the result. So we are trying to keep the sustainability.
So you
along with we are increasing spending.
Yeah, and you're confident that what growth will make up for will generate enough revenue to make all this possible?
Yes. We firmly believe in we should sharply move from the extensive cost-cut economy toward a vital boosting investment economy, and it will bring about more tax revenue and more consumption, and that will have a virtuous cycle of economy.
Okay, final question for you before I turn to the rest of the panel. As you look at the Japanese economy in this new geopolitical situation and also massive technological change, AI and so on, what do you see as the sectors where Japan can really excel?
Yeah, we have already designated 17 fields, including AI, AI-related robotics, physical AI, semiconductor, fusion, quantum, and maritime, and defense, and what else? All major fields of which we can say that will do also good to not only to Japanese economy but also Japanese national security or future resilience. So that's why we are called these investments, not only growth strategy but also crisis management.
Okay, well, you mentioned national security, and Kevin, this is an issue you've followed across the Indo-Pacific. And one of the striking things about the Takaichi government was that almost as soon as she came in, she found herself embroiled in a row with China over a statement the Chinese objected to on Taiwan. The Chinese, in fairly typical fashion, ratcheting up pressure on Tokyo. Watching all this, how do you see Japan's, well, how do you interpret those incidents, but also in the broader context of Japan's geopolitical situation?
Good, thanks. I'm ambassador in Washington, but I'm here in a private capacity. So these are my remarks. Firstly, Australia and I think the rest of the Indo-Pacific is very bullish about Japan. And listening carefully to what Minister Satsuki just said about the economic program of the Takaichi administration, Takaichi government, we draw great encouragement from that. And Japan across the Indo-Pacific is seen as a force for strength, for stability, and increasingly for prosperity. Remember the enormous source that Japan still represents in terms of foreign direct investment right across the Indo-Pacific region. On the specific questions you raised in relation to Japan and China, as you know, the history of the China-Japan relationship has been problematic over many, many decades. I am confident that this current set of difficulties will be overcome by both governments. The bottom line is, for countries like India, like Australia, we are strong Quad partners of Japan. All four countries, together with the United States, are committed to long-term strategic stability in the Indo-Pacific. Furthermore, we are collaborating with Japan intimately on the future supply of critical minerals, rare earths, both raw and refined, as well as in critical technologies. And also, what we are doing with Japan is enhancing not only our own defense relationship with Japan and with Korea and with India, but increasingly we find the collaboration across our respective defense communities becoming closer and closer, quite apart from our separate alliances with the United States. Or in the case of India, of course, it's not an ally. So you put these factors together, I mean, the Indo-Pacific, looking at a large economy like Japan, looking at a large source of foreign direct investment, our friends from NEC are here, for example, looking at Japan as a source of innovation and advanced manufacture, and now a government under Takaichi doubling down on bringing AI across every element of the Japanese economy. So we see a positive story emerging from Japan, and one which we think will add to aggregate strategic stability in the region. And the Japan-China relationship, always problematic, will continue to be managed.
Okay. Mr. Morita, I mean, you lead one of Japan's most important companies in, you know, the technological area that's changing so fast. As you look at the opportunities for your company and indeed your country, how do you see it?
Yeah, firstly, the big difference I saw in the last few years is that people started openly talking about like national security together with economy, right? In the past, and we are kind of reluctantly splitting those two type of things. But now we are seriously consider that these two are closely tied, and I'm very much welcoming like openness of new Prime Minister Takaichi-san, and she clearly mentioned like this kind of cross tie between the two. And then, and the focus area of 17 is including defense as well as high kind of advanced technologies. So that's we should think about. And also, I think thanks to the AI, we see the greater opportunities coming in. And as far as I understand, we are in a very early stage of implementing AI in real our lives. And we are talking about GPU, we are talking about LMN, we are talking about data center. That's going to be very, very infrastructures in a sense, in order to make like use of those kind of new innovation. We have to change the society. We have to change the education. We have to change the people. We have to change the way of doing everything, right? So in that case, and I think we really need to use the data which is not on the internet, and it's a real life, real world data, and intuitive data, and also some kind of proprietary data. And those things will be realized by like a very job-specific language model. That is a small language model, which is kind of well-trained for very specific purpose. And also the agents, and many agents. So together with those things and implementing into real environment by using like real world data, that's going to be happening in a real application. And I think that areas is Japan is very much good at. And also the biggest issue we are facing is a kind of social resistance. But look at Japan, right? Population is declining, right? We are suffering from the shortage of workforce. So who blame it, right? And everybody happy to get robotics and AI into real world. So
you're saying that the kind of the concerns that others have about, well, is AI going to take a lot of jobs?
Yeah.
In
Right.
Japan, it's rather different because you have a shrinking labor force anyway.
Yeah.
Right,
How much
right,
it is.
right.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Just one other question. I mean, certainly reading the business press, the whole question of the development of AI is often portrayed as a US-China battle. Those are the two countries that are leading a race, if you like, and the rest of us are kind of nowhere. But Japan is a very advanced technological power. Do you see a role for Japan at the cutting edge of all this stuff?
Yes, I think that's why the Japanese government is kind of heavily investing in that field. I think we have to admit today, right, and public-private collaboration must be happening in order to cope with like global competitiveness, especially in the area of infrastructure, digital infrastructure, how to protect the country, how to build up those kind of infrastructure, water, electricity, right? And those are kind of key element for industry, but that have to be affordable price, right? So I think like that is a kind of responsibility of nations, and I think that's I'm expecting Japanese government take a lead.
Okay, well, I'll ask about that in a second. But Marwan, I mean, you're a long-time friend of Japan, a long-time visitor to Japan, known the country for 40 years and doing business there. How do you see its current situation?
Well, I'm quite intrigued by the positive news I heard from the minister and Marita about the technology and advancement in Japan. But once it comes to reality, my experience in Japan, I'm talking about as an outsider from Japan, Japan is a first-class country. They have first-class platform of intelligence, first-class technology. Everything is at the top. But at the same time, it's a closed society, whereby it's difficult for outsiders to do business in Japan. So this
Even
is
for one like you who's been going there a long, long time.
it's difficult. It takes time to unpeel the layers in Japan, as they say it, number one. Number two, I feel that Japan was on the quantum leap in the 80s and the 90s in terms of R&D and in terms of technology, especially in pharma and other aspects. But during the last couple of years, I have witnessed a shrinking in the expenditure of R&D, and the minister just said that. So all of these things have led to a vacuum of certain, especially in my field, in the healthcare, whereby we saw the neighbors of Japan over beating Japan in terms of technology, in terms of targeted therapies, and in terms of new advancements. Now we have new Japanese companies that are going into this. I'm sitting on board one of them, Rakuten Medical, where we're using artificial intelligence for tumors. We're doing studies in Japan. But even on that level, and until today, the Japanese laws do not allow, for example, cross-cultural bioequivalence studies that are being conducted from overseas and Japan. So the Japanese government has to open more on the outside world in order to develop that process of engagement. So they have to open, not stay as a closed society. I respect Japan as a closed society after historically. But for me to become competitive, especially with the declining population, now you're not seeing a new generation. Now the new generation, for example, the old generation doesn't talk English. The new generation is now quite well knowledgeable. You see a paradox in Japan. I'll just say this for humor. I was in Osaka during the expo. I was shocked. I went to Nara with my wife. We wanted to go to the temple. We couldn't enter the temple because they don't take credit cards, for example. I mean, in the 21st century, who does that? And there are certain things I think that we need to adapt in order for Japan to be back where it was. Japan was always at the forefront of technology, at the forefront of delivering new ideas. I would definitely like to see Japan being there. Now, from what I heard today, I hope with the government and with the new fiscal policies, we will be back on track as we go forward.
Okay, well, some interesting views from a kind of slightly critical friend. Minister, I'd like to give you a chance to respond. Do you think it's fair to say that Japan is still, in some respects, a slightly closed society and that you need to do more to open up, or is that a misunderstanding?
Yeah, Japanese economy is, I honestly think it's a relatively open one, but the hesitation of, for example, testing of pharmaceutical is not coming from that we are closed, but Japanese people have a tendency not to cooperate with that kind of testing. So we increased our R&D budget by a great deal last year, supplementary budget, and this year. That will try to put many research and development as many as possible into domestic field, but we let that field of your field as legal exemption because we are in short of that. But this is true that research and development is essential in many fields, and as pharmaceutical sector, let's say 10 or 20 years, they were aiming for a bigger business. But after all, most of our big pharmaceutical companies finally had an alliance, capital alliance with big worldwide spreading companies. And now they all come to see me because last year was a battle year of medical and pharmaceutical budgets. And that is a tendency to be lowered by Trump administration. So they came to ask me to stop that lowering. We cannot bear anymore. That kind of difficulty is always rising in the sector. It's particular because in Japan it's universal health coverage, but in United States it's not. And U.S. government is trying to minimize the expense onto that compensation for American people. And some are aiming for more universal. So that is a big social and political problem that we have to think about it.
Very interesting, yeah. And in fact, I think that pressure from the Trump administration on pharmaceuticals points to a broader issue for Japan, actually for all countries in the world, but we're talking about Japan, which is that the United States is a less reliable partner, I think we can say. I mean, that it has imposed tariffs on Japan, its close ally, that it is demanding massive Japanese investment in the United States. And at the same time, your other major trading partner, as Kevin was saying, very difficult relationship with China, just got a bit more difficult. I gather the Chinese, when I was last in Tokyo, it was full of Chinese tourists, and now I'm told they've been told not to come and things like that. So how do you, as one of the world's largest economy, but not a superpower, navigate this new geopolitical environment and run an economy when you have both the US and China putting different forms of pressure on you?
Mr. Lashman, it's a very good question and always posed to us. We are between United States and China for long years, and we can't move geopolitically. And we did have a war with both of that. Yeah. We know both of them very, very well. So finally, we had the only national security treaty with the United States. The United States is the only ally in this field. And even last week, I was in Washington, D.C., and my friend Scott Bassett was organizing a G7 critical mineral meeting. It was very successful. And on that sense, we are facing the restriction from the side of Chinese government without any good reason. But it also happened. It's always happening since 2010. These reasons now have nothing to do with trade or economy, just for another reason. But wherever it happens, United States and our ally in G7 are always of our helps. And Japan is the only country which have seat in G7, and it's been 50 years. We have the only country in Asia who have a complete free currency. So that's my answer. We, geopolitically, we are always trying to be in our best position. And now it's as it is.
Kevin, putting your hat on as a geopolitical thinker, it seems to me it's like a common dilemma for a lot of middle powers, Japan, but also Australia, also Canada. You see Mark Carney trying to sort of chart a new direction for his country. How does one navigate between an unpredictable United States, where you're based right now, and China?
I think the first principle is in the Indo-Pacific. If you look carefully at the Trump administration's national security strategy, which I have, it's very clear where its priorities lie. And it is also clear that the future of the Indo-Pacific is of fundamental national security significance and economic significance to this Trump administration. Whatever noise occurs in the public debate about foreign policy and national security policy, have a look at the fundamentals of the agreed interagency, administration-wide position, within which they see enhanced roles for allies such as Japan, the Republic of Korea and Australia, and also the Philippines within the region. So that is kind of pretty fundamental. It's a different set of geostrategic circumstances to that which we now see in relation to Europe and the transatlantic. I think the second point is, going back to the China dynamic, the reality is because Japan is a long-standing treaty ally of the United States, so is the ROK, so is Australia, India, a more recent strategic partner of the United States, that creates of itself underlying and continued structural tensions with Beijing. That's just a reality. And the challenge of foreign policy and economic policy is simply to navigate within that reality rather than pretend that reality doesn't exist. That's why the Japanese Self-Defense Force continues to grow, the Australian Defence Force continues to grow, similarly in India and similarly in the ROK, and they work increasingly together. Thirdly, for the future, and again it goes back to an earlier comment I made about Japan, open society, closed society. I've been to Japan many times. I like the place a lot. Don't know it as well as you. I know China very well. I speak Chinese, I don't speak Japanese. If we take the existing arrangements which underpin our, shall we say, common endeavours in the Indo-Pacific, it's a Japanese idea to create a free and open Indo-Pacific. That's a Japanese idea, which the rest of us have accepted. It's a Japanese-led initiative to have the Trans-Pacific Partnership 11, minus the United States, because they're currently in a protectionist frame of mind. But if you take those two visions carefully, it answers your question about how can Japan and the rest of us open increasingly to each other. Japan, Korea, Australia, India, the four largest economies outside of China in the Indo-Pacific. And you put those four together, you're looking at a critical mass of goods and services, investment markets and technology before you look at our external links with Europe. So finally, in terms of navigating the US relationship, this is an ongoing pragmatic challenge for each of us. But I'm saying in the Indo-Pacific, the fundamentals are of a different nature to those which pertain in Europe at present.
Just a quick one. The national security strategy you refer to and then subsequent US actions in Venezuela and now towards Greenland, there's this new emphasis on the Western Hemisphere. Are you concerned at all that that sort of is a nod towards a spheres of influence world which would see a declining US role in the Indo-Pacific?
I think you apply there a zero-sum game. It's one or the other. Let's take three traditional areas of US strategic engagement. Number one, the Indo-Pacific, China-US strategic competition. Number two, the transatlantic and Europe, currently seeing the dynamics of Russia-Ukraine. And three, the Middle East in all of its complexity and its sub-theatres, of which there are many. Underpinning that is an abiding Republican concern and MAGA concern about their own hemisphere, and certainly about increased Chinese presence in Latin America, both the Caribbean and mainland Latin America. It is therefore understandable that this administration places now a new priority on Latin America, but it is a false analysis of their national security priorities to see an increased, shall we say, activity tempo in Latin America and a parallel decrease in the Indo-Pac. I was recently in Indo-Pacific Command in Honolulu with Admiral Paparo. There is nothing but growth occurring in the Indo-Pacific in terms of US capabilities, US operations, and US engagement with the rest of us. It's a different reality.
Okay, Mr. Morita, I mean, in your earlier remarks, you said that tech and defense are increasingly important, and we know the Japanese defense budget is going up. But Japan has its own very specific culture on defense, has been worried, for example, about defense exports. Do you think that is changing, and do you see Japan developing a really significant defense tech sector now in this new changed situation?
I feel that the definition of the defense is changing over the time, right? And cybersecurity, right? And are you talking about cybersecurity as a part of defense or war and army or something? And also, we are doing a submarine cable, which is a very much essential part for protecting the country, but it's a cable and the connections and broadband bandwidth, right? But that's very much essential for protecting like digital infrastructures for the country. And we see that a lot of things happening in that areas. So Japan, and without like kind of arguing those kind of things, this is a part of a defense, this is not defense. We are talking about advanced technology, which is a kind of increasing the protection of the country, right? And for example, like a satellite, right? A satellite constellation is can be used for like observatory of situations and surely helping the country to protect its land. And also submarine cable as well, and also AI. For example, Japan is one of the few countries who can develop the large language model from scratch. So it's a pretty much autonomous, like independency we can capture. Japan in a position of sharing that benefit to other countries other than China and the United States. That's a way I think we can contribute to like increase the protection on the peaceful world. That's I think we should do.
Okay, I want to give the audience a chance to ask some questions in a second, but a last one for the Minister.
Yeah.
Prime Minister Takaichi is the first female Prime Minister of Japan, and you are the first female Finance Minister.
Yes.
And I remember, in previous Japan sessions during the Abe period, there was a lot of talk about womenomics. Are we now actually seeing it in action, that Japan is mobilizing its female talent, really? And is that part of your pitch going into this election?
Of course, it's always part of our pitch. And also, we are trying to protect and reinforce what Mr. Morita has said. This is the force of our industry in the super high-tech area. Only Japan can do that. And also, a sort of financial technology which are coming. Maybe Japan could be a little bit advanced in the coming digitalization of finance and coming cryptocurrency utilization, because we are still on the level of testing, even in the United States. But Japan is the first country to introduce legislation onto that. I had a talk with Scott on this matter too, and maybe in near future, in a very near future, there will be a stable coin market exchange between dollar and yen, and maybe a little better with euro. This kind of new proposition can be posed from Japanese side because Japan is Japan. So it's not only women mix, but we would like to take advantage of what we are, like these two gentlemen mentioned kindly to us.
Okay, excellent. Let me see, is there any questions from the audience? Anybody like to ask a question to the panel? Yeah, I see a hand over there. Microphone for you. If you could identify who you are as well, that was always helpful.
Hi, I'm Ian Lindsay, advisor to the Prime Minister of Bahrain and a former British diplomat in Tokyo. My question really is to Satsuki Daijin.
Yes.
The debate on immigration in Japan. This has been ongoing for quite a while. Japan's rate of immigration is very low compared to the OECD. Foreign residents only represent 3% of Japan's population. OECD average is 15%. Clearly, we've already had references to Japan's aging population, and that's one of the reasons why foreign workers have been brought in. But that has caused something of a backlash. The governors of all the prefectures have just issued a statement talking for a rational debate on immigration. Minister, how can we see this going forward? Does Japan need more foreign workers? And if not, why not?
Thank you very much for the question. This is a hotly discussed matter. Maybe in the coming election that will be one of the matter between us and the proposition. But we all say, our LDP party says that we are in a position to welcome those who are good to us in any sense. Good friends coming in, and those who did something wrong or illegal should be left. But we couldn't reinforce the latter in real stages. That's why we have a certain voluminous population illegally came into Japan and staying. And that will increase the Japanese feeling of uncertainty in that particular area. That really happened. So we changed the mode of our driver license. a mode of a new coming in businessman visa. It was very, very cheap compared to your country. We raised it to the international level. That's what we are doing. But that is true that Japanese culture is a very, very special one. And I was in France for 2 years, and I remember the day, I was under Mitterrand administration. They tried to assimilate all people coming from their ex-colonies. Ex-colonies means they speak French perfectly. But even that, there was a strong negative feeling among Parisian or French people. Different culture. So we also feel different culture because the ratio of foreigner attained 3%. And in some area it's very tensioned, so concentrated. The ratio is higher. And so we would like to ease these uncertainty, and we would like to welcome those good people and not bad. The rule is very clear.
Just to summarize, do you expect overall numbers of immigrants to rise gradually or to come down a bit now?
We are not very sure of the percentage, but we are not imagining that situation where our society will be like European countries. That is very different.
Sure. Yeah, gentleman here. It's over there.
Hi, I'm Yuito Yamada from McKinsey. Question to Kevin. Japan has some strengths in the semiconductor value chain, contains 50% market share of some of the critical materials such as photoresists, silicon wafer and all that. The question is, how could Japan use these supply chain, value chain strengths towards some of the strategic allies, as well as also some of the competitive contenders that it has?
I think there are two core dimensions to supply chain vulnerability as they impact Japan and frankly the rest of us across the Indo-Pacific and the world. One is where we now find ourselves in terms of semiconductors and their inputs, and then secondly, more broadly, in terms of critical minerals and rare earths. On the first, it's no mystery that in terms of semiconductors, we look to TSMC, we look to Samsung, and we look to Intel, and with some Dutch lithography on the way through. So the reality is these overall semiconductor supply chains need to be broadened. There's no better country to participate in the broadening of that than Japan. Because, as you know, compute coming out of semiconductors determines and shapes AI, the entire AI stack. And those of us who succeed and welcome and adapt and adopt to the AI universe will prevail. And those of us who don't will not. On the second part of the equation, which is critical minerals and rare earths, we have observed carefully what's happened in Japan historically and more recently in the United States in terms of vulnerabilities. So we have acted. Australia equals the periodic table. Okay? That is, it's not because we are necessarily particularly clever, it's just that that's our real estate. But we are very clever at mining, extracting and refining this stuff. And so what we've just agreed and negotiated with the United States in the last several months, and the Trump administration through Prime Minister Albanese, and I've been intimately engaged in the negotiation of it, is a critical minerals and rare earths accord. It is real. It is substantive. It is project-specific, mine-specific, processing facility-specific, and if you look at the trajectory of where we'll now go on raw and refined rare earths over the next 3 years, it will radically change America's current vulnerabilities. The opportunity for Japan and Korea and other partners, which we are already working on with both Seoul and Tokyo, and frankly with the Europeans, is to ensure that we add on through the G7 mechanism, which Minister Satsuki attended just last week in DC. I was there as well with our finance minister, is to broaden this out to the G7+. That removes this as a vulnerability in terms of supply chain interdiction. And that's necessitates industrial policy intervention. And for those of you who purchase and need critical minerals and rare earths into the future, it will mean a price adjustment. But there's an offsetting factor here. Security